The Make a Good Mega Man level contest games have been really interesting to me. Playing levels made by tons of people all combined into a neat package with some extra elements added to make them more than just collections of levels for a contest. But a large number of those levels were kind of bad. City War, Yggdrasil. So when Mag Mammal Episode 0 promised to have that same experience, now with a dev team helping level creators make their stages a bit more polished, I was really excited. And while yes, the game is really good, you should play it, the video is not a full review of it as a whole package. Instead, I'm going to briefly cover every single one of the game's levels and give my thoughts on them. Note that this is not me trying to act as a judge in a similar fashion to the judge comments from Mag Mammal 1 and 2. This is me talking about my personal opinions of each of the stages. This will contain heavy spoilers for the entirety of the game, so this is your last chance to leave. Alright, let's get into this. Explosive Freefall, SnowRun Pyro. This stage is a pretty good introduction stage, but its main gimmick of free falling through space means that most of the level isn't spent actually platforming. It is instead spent just falling through empty space with enemies and hazards flying at you. It works, but doesn't really set you up for what you're about to play the rest of the game as. Surveillance Canyon, SnowRun Pyro. This stage is way better at giving you an idea of what to expect, but the sheer number of instant death pits makes it pretty challenging for a level that comes this early. Still a fun stage, but it can be pretty challenging roadblock for a new player. Gusty Gorge, SV and Ranga. Now this is how you do an early game level right. The main gimmick is simple and versatile, but doesn't overstay its welcome. And while the areas focused only on enemy challenges feel a bit bland, the platforming with the wind and moving cloud platforms was done exceptionally well, and even has a really good auto-scroll section. Defeat the Giant Spearman, Cape Luigi's Yoshi. This stage initially seems really cool. A level entirely based on referencing Wario Land 4 seems like a great concept, but it doesn't really work until the final section. Most of the platforming is really simple, and the enemies either have too much health or are way too hard to hit. And having to fight the Giant Spearman 3 times gets tedious pretty fast, as the first 2 fights are literally the same, the second one just has more health. But the third fight incorporates elemental attacks, making it a whole lot more unique. The final escape sequence and its bonus challenge to get a collectible CD is the clear highlight of the level, and a great way to end off this otherwise annoying area. Technically after this point you head to Mega City and fight the SRARA up and down, but since that's just a boss fight, I won't specifically cover it. Aside from saying that it's a really nice boss encounter, it does a good job of showing you what some of the more unique bosses are capable of. Kingdom Crisis, the Retro Dude. Mario Land from the first Mag Mammal was a prime example of relying too much on an aesthetic as the main focus of the stage, but Kingdom Crisis fixes that issue. With green shell Metars, on and off switches, and thwomps, it takes the idea of a Mario stage in a Mega Man game and makes it more than just a visual effect. And the Concrete Man plus Thwomp boss is a really funny capstone to this really fun experience. Lost Valley, MAGE. While Lost Valley first just seems like a generic level using the visuals of Skullman stage, it actually managed to use its limited set of gimmick platforms to make some interesting challenges that mainly focus around avoiding spikes. The only issue is that the level just kind of ends with no real climactic challenge. There's a final gauntlet, but it only uses one type of moving platform, and it doesn't really get difficult the further you get into it. So once you reach the end, it doesn't feel like you earned anything, it just kind of feels like the level was missing a few extra screens to really nail that final challenge. Contra Base, Silvernix SP. Contra Base starts out great, with a well-paced opening section based off the first level in Contra. But once you reach the underground fortress part, it heavily overuses bullet-spewing turrets and electric laser traps. But it picks up again as you enter the final area, which is of course based on the final stage of Contra. And while the boss is just kind of a big thing that sits in the background shooting more projectiles at you, it's not a bad fight. Overall, the level does have some issues. It does a nice job of paying homage to some of the more memorable parts of Contra, without relying too much on it just by looking like it. Sky High Ridge, Sir Sins. In many ways, Sky High Ridge feels better and worse than Gusty Gorge. It has better enemy challenges, but the platforming-based challenges rely way too much on the mid-air dash and nothing else. The really good part comes in how it recontextualizes a few mini-bosses to make them more interesting by adding extra elements to the arenas you fight them in. But the fact that it doesn't even have its own boss fight, just another altered mini-boss battle before the end, makes it have the same issue as Lost Valley, where it just doesn't really feel complete. Twilight Terrace, J8-bit. Twilight Terrace is one of the best examples on how to do a platforming-based level in a Mega Man game. There's only 2 gimmicks which fit together perfectly: swinging claws and platforms that switch between being solid and non-existent each time you jump. Its final area tests you on both of these at the same time with no solid ground to stand on and regain focus, so you just have to rush through it, reacting to each new part quickly to avoid dying. And while it does reuse the same mini-boss twice, or 3 times if you want to get the extra collectible CD, the other elements of the stage are so good that I can ignore that issue. Abandoned Lab, Scatman's World. Now this is a stage that I have some mixed feelings about. It's pretty long and doesn't do much to spice up its main gimmick of invincible flying magnet enemies, but the challenges it does present with those are still really nice, and it has one really high point right at the very end that I have to talk about. Doc Robot, fully reimagined to have way more attacks, a fight that actually lasts full 3 phases. It's incredible, but just one boss can't save a level that otherwise doesn't have much else going for it. Subterranean Stronghold, D Prototype. As the second to last level of Chapter 1, Subterranean Stronghold is a pretty nice but simple stage, with the up and down platforms managing to create some tense platforming challenges with bottomless pits, and a good variety of enemies. It's a well-rounded stage. The music took a bit of time for me to warm up to it, but it's not that bad. While the boss you fight at the end of stage isn't anything ridiculously insane, Punk is still a good finale to an overall simple but really enjoyable level. Vertical Hunger, Harbage 12. And here we are, the final level of Chapter 1. This stage is clearly based loosely on Boomer Kuwanger's stage from the original Mega Man X, but it doesn't use any gimmicks from there. Instead, it opts for a more stealth-based challenge with searchlights. But once you defeat the hologram Boomer Kuwanger, the entire level changes from a somewhat stealthy and pretty easy challenge to an intense final section with alarms blaring and tons more enemies to take down. The giant Boomer Kuwanger fight is really interesting, but his weak spot is not that obvious and is pretty difficult to hit with most of the weapons that you're going to have at this point in the game. Very nice level and an amazing finale to the first chapter. And so that wraps it up for all the levels in Chapter 1. Next comes Chapter 2 and its 4 elemental paths. See you in the next video.